Good afternoon, Michael Malice here. Let that be your welcome for the next hour. I am very, very excited to have a dear friend, returning guest of the show, Dave Rubin, host of the Rubin Report. We have a lot to unpack. We're recording this on Friday as there's breaking news because next week I will be in New York doing Andrew Schultz's show. Dave, you're just back from Israel, where you had a very entertaining, interesting, informative trip. And I want to talk to you about that because I think so much of the information out there is hearsay as opposed to being there, talking to people, talking, I'm sure, people who are making decisions and getting the lay of the land there. But we had breaking news, which we rarely have on this show because it's not a news show as we're recording, which was Candace Owens and Daily Wire have parted ways. And now she has joined Locals. You were kind of big in promoting her in the start of her career. That debate between her and Blair White on your show was like the shit show of the year, whatever year that was. I'm very curious to hear your thoughts as to her joining Locals and this whole situation.
Yeah, first off, well, it's good to see you, my friend. And yeah, we had no idea when we set this up a couple of days ago that this was going to go down this morning. You know, there have been rumors for the last couple of weeks that the thing between her and Ben and the Daily Wire was going to not end well at some point. It was fairly obvious. I don't know if you saw, Michael, but I was on the Patrick Bet David podcast yesterday, and he was asking me about some of the tension there. And I said, look, obviously she wants out. And it's obvious that Ben wants her out. It had come to its fruition, the way they were going after each other, the way it had gotten so nasty, the different directions that they had taken on Israel and Hamas and everything else. It was just clear it was going to end this way. What I was trying to say to PBD yesterday was that putting aside the specifics of whether you support Israel, whether you support Hamas, any of that stuff, that everyone in our space, you know this, Malice, you've been in this game as long as me, like everyone in our space has their own pressures and desires and all of those things. So Candace joined the Daily Wire. They obviously paid her a ton of money to do that because when you join a network, as opposed to going independent, they're going to pay a premium on you because they're going to, in effect, own you and own your content. Versus you on Locals, which you were, when I started Locals, you were, I think, in the top two people I called. It was you and Bridget Fedezi when we started this thing. I was like, here are two guys on their way up, doing their own thing. They're free agents. And I think they have an audience that will support them. And clearly that's borne out to be true. But there's a risk in that because you don't know how many subscribers you're going to get. You don't have the luxury of having a network and a system and production behind you and all of those things. My calculation in building Locals was that I think that empowering creators to be independent and be free, and what Michael Malice says at the end of the day is on Michael Malice. And if Michael Malice really botches one, then the chances that Michael Malice is going to fire Michael Malice probably pretty slim. And you've built something really beautiful, which I'm genuinely thrilled for as a friend, but also because it's proof that my concept was right about this thing. So look, we just found out. I did not know until I saw her tweet this morning that she's joining Locals and she'll go independent. And that's just great. That's just great. Look, I clearly disagree with her on some of the Israel stuff for sure. And she's gone after me in some odd ways. And it's kind of been unfortunate because we were very good friends, I would say, for a long time. I was at her wedding just a few weeks before our kids were born. She was helping us pick out strollers, sent us baby gifts. We've shared many meals together at each other's homes. So that's sort of, on a personal note, a bit disappointing. But I would say this is the direction that everything's going in. You know, the internet kind of goes in like an unbundling. People start getting fame on their own and building things on their own. Then they bundle into networks. Then they unbundle. Then it's cyclical. But I saw this coming. It was fairly obvious. And just think about it this way. And I'd love to get your thoughts. It's like for Ben or anyone at the Daily Wire, if you're running that network and you have an employee who is going after your head guy, and you've built what in essence is like $1 billion company at this point. They have built something incredible there. Like, you don't need that drama there. And now they will see whether, again, we don't know if she was fired or if it was mutual or she walked or whatever. So we'll find out that. But now the proof will be in the pudding, because are they going to lose a ton of subscribers? Is she going to gain a ton of subscribers? We'll see on Locals. I have no idea. But, the market will dictate. And I think that's the best way for things to be. That's the freest way people can do what they want to do.
Yeah, I just think there's a certain level of irony that she went from Daily Wire and like the ink's not even dry on the pink slip or the I'm out of here note, and she's going to a website that is run by someone who is as fervent of a Zionist as Ben Shapiro, if that is even possible. So if she's concerned about persecution by them, I don't know that maybe she's necessarily in the best place to find shelter at locals.
Well,
Although on the other hand,
no. Well, no, Malice. I know you're being slightly tongue in cheek there, but our policy at Locals is you do what you want, you create what you want, you say what you want. If you break the laws of the United States, you have a much bigger problem than us. But beyond that, if she wants to do videos, talking crap about me or going after Israel or whatever it might be, that is her prerogative. And I think we built a technology that was to do just this. The thing, Michael, it's like, free speech is only, your defense of free speech only really makes any sense if you're going to defend the speech of people that you disagree with. And by the way, I should also note that, we merged with Rumble, so I no longer own the company. I do advise and I help out to the degree that I can. And I'm thrilled that we've built something so great. But she won't be kicked off the platform unless she does something illegal, which again, then she's going to have much bigger problems than us.
Yeah. Are you surprised that she didn't reach out to you ahead of time to be like, heads up, I'm coming to your house?
No, again, it's kind of disappointing. When she started, when I said on PBD's podcast the other day that we're not really friends anymore, what I meant by that wasn't really, we disagree on Israel and Palestine or Gaza. That's not it. I love having disagreements with people, relish in it, even for the things that I hold very dear. What I meant by that was, when she started becoming very famous, she unfollowed me on Twitter. She changed her phone number. Those aren't the type of things that friends do, unless you view friendship as a purely transactional thing. Like I helped her to become famous, and then she thought she didn't need me anymore or something. Actually, David, my husband, came up with the title of her book, Blackout, in our backyard after a dinner. I think she even credited him once in an Instagram live or something. So we've been close for years, but I don't view friendship as kind of transactional. I think she perhaps does. I don't even like talking that nonsense. It's just insider baseball stuff. But no, so I'm not surprised that she didn't call me to be on the platform. But again, my feelings about her or whether I disagree with her or anything else is completely irrelevant as to her being on the platform. I think her giving it a go independently is interesting. Let's see, the Daily Wire may have just looked at the numbers. People want to come up with all sorts of conspiracy theories and that Ben was, secretly behind the scenes doing this to get rid of her, but they might have looked at the numbers. And I don't know the numbers, so I'm purely making this up, but they might have looked at the numbers and been like, boy, we're paying her $5 million a year for a 4-year contract. That's $20 million. She had a live studio show that was costing them a ton of money, which they canceled. So then she started doing a podcast, a much more low grade thing like you and I do. Low grade's not quite the right word, but you know what I mean? Simpler, less budget. And they might have just been like, okay, that's not really working for us either. She's causing us such a headache. And we looked at the numbers and actually people do let us know why they're subscribing. Turns out 70% of our people subscribe because of Ben. 10% subscribe because of Knowles, 5% subscribe because of Clavin, 2% subscribe because of her. She's causing us such a headache. It's just not worth it.
And zero Matt Walsh.
And screw that girl. Guy, whatever he or she is. But that, you know what I'm saying? It might have been that simple that at some point, because it's not just Daily Wire, anyone, if there was if Chuck Scarborough, I always call him Chuck Scarborough, he was on NBC, you're a New York guy,
yes,
but if Joe Scarborough Chuck Scarborough way better than Joe Scarborough. Yes. But if Joe Scarborough every day on MSNBC was attacking Rachel Maddow, the execs might look at the books and be like, you know what, actually, he's a daytime show, she's a nighttime show, she generates a lot more rev, this is causing us a headache, it's a pain in the ass with PR, blah, 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 let's just get rid of him. So it might have been way more of just a cold, calculating business decision than some conspiracy theory. But the point is, she wanted it, obviously, which is why she's been going and going and going in that direction and liking tweets that involve blood libel and claiming Israel is promoting genocide, which I don't believe that she actually believes. And she was pushing that as far as she could. And I think Ben tolerated it as far as he could. And then who knows what actually happened yesterday. I guess we'll find out, maybe.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure there will probably be competing narratives, and people have to kind of look at and figure things out for themselves. So you are back from Israel. Can you tell us the circumstances of your trip? Is travel there now allowed? Like what's the lay of the land? I'm very curious because again, there's a very big difference between us sitting here on our asses, talking in front of a computer, actually going there and seeing man in the street stuff.
Yeah, it was very intense. Very intense.
What were the
From the second,
circumstances that set up the trip? If you can let us know.
yeah. So obviously, I've been talking a lot about October 7th since this horrific, barbaric, like unspeakable event occurred. I have a great affinity to Israel. My brother-in-law, who I co-founded Locals with, is Israeli. I've been there 5 or 6 times in my life. They're a tiny little oasis of freedom in a pretty freaking rough part of the world, and they share actual American values as it relates to individual freedom and the idea of a melting pot of a society where really people from all walks of life, the narrative is so backwards on Israel that it's somehow these white colonial settlers. And you go to Israel, and most of the people at this point are from Morocco and Iraq and Iran and all of these other places, and they're brown and they're mixed, or they're from Ethiopia and everywhere else. And by the way, even if they were mostly white, that wouldn't be wrong. I don't have a problem with people based on the color of their skin, but there's a weird identitarian problem happening on the right now as well related to that. So I had wanted to go, and then a group reached out to me called the Maccabee Task Force, and they said, "Hey, we're sending people. We don't ask that you do anything. We don't say that you have to say anything nice. You don't have to say anything at all. But would you like to go? We'll fly you and put you up in a hotel and help facilitate you going to some of the kibbutzim that were destroyed. I mean, completely destroyed, and to the Nova Festival and everything else." So, it was interesting because when I got on the plane, from the moment I got on the plane, there was a very different feeling. I mean, even before you get on the plane, because you're seeing all these people, they know they're going to a war zone. A lot of them live there, and they had just been visiting the United States. And I had a very weird moment right before we took off, which is I kind of looked around the plane, and I was like, wow, Hamas would love to kill everyone on this plane. And then I thought, oh, I'm on this plane.
Yeah.
That Homer Simpson moment, like, we need a guy like me. Oh, I'm a guy like me. And that's genuinely what I thought. I was like, oh, like, that's legit. Anyway, I got there, and look, we're
Wait,
six.
before, hold on.
Yeah.
Was there like heightened security? Was it easy to get there? Like, can you talk about that?
Yeah. Well, I flew on El Al, which is obviously the Israeli national carrier. They always have crazy security. And what's interesting is as Americans, we go through TSA and everything, and it's a bunch of people that do not look qualified to be doing much of anything. And we know that, all sorts of stuff gets through that shouldn't get through. Israel, in many ways, you can get through much quicker a lot of times because they have real security. Meaning that you are interviewed. I was flying business class, so it's a separate line, so I go a little bit quicker. But you basically talk to an agent who asks you 10 or so pinpoint questions, and they try to confuse you, and they're obviously reading your body language and your eyes and all of that stuff. So I don't know that I have no doubt actually that there is more security than usual. I just don't know that you see it on the ground, because I've gone in other times where there's also other things going on, and the level of security they're dealing with obviously goes beyond what we can see. Anyway, we get to Tel Aviv. Israel only has one international airport. It's a tiny country the size of New Jersey. And there was just a feeling like, there's obviously a lot of Israeli flags up, and you see the hostage posters, throughout the airport as you're walking out and all of that stuff. But there was a real feeling like I was making sure to really kind of thank everybody that I interacted with, whether it was the flight attendant or anyone that I was buying a coffee from or anything. And I felt like a real awareness or presence that maybe you don't feel in normal times, or that we don't feel in the hustle bustle of our life. We did go down south. So Gaza obviously is in southern Israel. We visited one of the kibbutz. It's called Kibbutz Kfar Zah. 900 people lived there before October 7th. And it's about 1.5 miles away from the border with Gaza. And they were mostly lefties that lived there. I mean, this is one of the fascinating things. This is one of the fascinating things that people don't understand. Many of the people who lived in these kibbutzim, they were lefties. They were peaceniks. They wanted to live in the South so that they could do commerce and interact with Gazans. And many of the Gazans who ended up killing them, not necessarily the Hamas terrorists, but the Gazans, because what happened was they shot all these rockets, they broke through the fence, they sent thousands of Hamas soldiers. They're soldiers, not just terrorists. But then there were thousands of regular citizens who also came in to loot and burn things down and everything else. And many of those people, they now know, were people who were working on the farms in Israel, working with doing other sorts of commerce in restaurants, all sorts of things, with people for decades that turned on them and killed them. You know, they had inside information on some of the houses. The Hamas people would write how many people lived in each house, so they knew how many people to kill. And the only reason they had that information was because there were Gazans that were working for these lefty Israelis. In any event, at that kibbutz,
Wait, hold
900
on.
people.
Before you get to
Yeah.
that, because as a New Yorker, you're also a New Yorker, it took me a very long time before I had the balls to go look at Ground Zero. Like I saw the footage on the TV. I didn't want to go near that block. Like I didn't want to see it with my own eyes because I knew it would be something that would really disturb me. And I remember like the first time I was like a block away and I turned my head and I saw it in the distance, and because they blocked off that whole area, for quite a long time, for people that don't know. And it's very different, as horrific as it is to see the scenes on TV. Or, this is one of the reasons I don't think I'm ever going to be able to go to Auschwitz. Like I'd rather see it in a book than walk. Obviously, it's rebuilt, but like walk on the grass and you hear the birds chirping and see in color. Like I don't know that I'd be able to handle it, or any of these like sites of like just mass death. Can you like just psychologically, knowing that if you had been there, you'd be killed, and it's not even a question, you'd be slaughtered, and your whole family. What was going through your head as you're like approaching this scene?
Yeah. So we got to the kibbutz, and it's maybe I can have my guys send you some video that we can play as B-roll
Sure,
while we're talking about it.
of course.
You're watching devastation that you can't imagine. I mean, burned out buildings, broken glass everywhere. They'd largely cleaned up the blood, but there was still even like you could sort of maybe smell like a little bit of death. I mean, there's a smell to it that is
Yes.
not easily removed. The overriding thought, you just mentioned Auschwitz, the overriding thought that I had that day, it popped into my head out of nowhere. And also you have to remember, these people, not only were they lefties, these were not people that were rich. These houses, most of the houses in this kibbutz were basically 1 or 2 bedroom houses, very small, one level. These were humble people who had nothing. Like the idea that they were these evil, colonial oppressors, and it's just insane.
It's communes.
But
This is a commie shit.
yeah,
Like old
yeah.
school commie shit. Yeah.
Yeah, they had next to nothing, but you'd walk down a block and everything was destroyed. So it's like everyone that everyone knew was dead. So the overriding thought, because you mentioned Auschwitz, for a moment, I've never been to Auschwitz, but I thought this must be what it feels like to have been in Auschwitz, except Auschwitz was a place made for death. It was designed for death. This was a place made for life. And these people had built beautiful lives, So there's one guy and his wife who have returned there. So there was a community of 900 people. Now 2 people live there. About 150 of them were killed, and then the rest now are displaced. Some of them are hostages. But he and his wife came back and lived there, and now he gives these tours. And to just see this man, he was talking about how beautiful everything was there. Like he's looking at the utter devastation of his home and everything else. I don't even know how he was even living in his home. There were bullet holes everywhere and everything else. But then he's talking about, but look at this corner. Look how beautiful this is with this tree and everything else. And you can see Gaza in the distance. I mean, the combining of all of this. But that notion right there, that idea of survival and will return and all of that, that is clearly what is special about the Jews throughout history, but I think particularly unique to Israelis who, since their inception and even before that, of the modern state of Israel, have gone through things that none of us can even imagine. They went through a year and a half of just random stabbings on the street. They went through 3 years of bus bombings and suicide bombings all over the place, car rammings, all of these things, shootings, rockets, and they're just still there, and they keep living. And after doing that, I went to Tel Aviv, and one night I was out at a club till 4 a.m. doing shots with people because they lived despite all of it. But just one thing on the psychological front, because you can't prepare yourself for it. It's right. Like as many of the videos have you seen, you can't. Well, you know about this 47-minute video that they have? Have you heard about this?
No, I've not.
So there's a 47-minute video that the IDF has where they've compiled some of the worst of the worst. So if you've seen bad videos of people being dragged and all the things, but I'm talking literal watching beheadings, like with nothing more than what looks like a kitchen knife, slowly slicing someone's head off and walking away. Grenades being thrown into bunkers with a father who you just see blown apart, and then his two little sons run out screaming, like unbelievably horrible things. When we saw that video, well, first off, I was told we were going to see it at some point during the week. They were going to show it to us. I did not realize we were going to see it that day. So we pull up to this thing and I wasn't sure where we were going. And then they said, okay, we're going to go in right now. And I had about a 2-minute window and my brain was not able to like fully adjust and prepare myself. Not that you can prepare yourself.
Of course, yes.
But when you see that level of psychosis, and by the way, the most twisted part, like the death and destruction, of course, is twisted. The smiles on Hamas people's faces while they're doing this, monsters, they're not people, foaming at the mouth, smiling, calling their mothers, saying, "Mom, I just killed 10 Jews. I have their blood on my hand." And the joy, selfies, taking selfies with women, with stacks of women behind them, with blood in their lower regions, which you can guess what that is. It's unimaginable. And that's what's been so twisted, I think, about some of the reaction that we've seen across the world. It's like, I'm happy to get into the history of all of this and that a state known as Palestine never existed and a people known as Palestinians who were Arab Muslim Palestinians never existed. And it was the British Mandate of Palestine and the Ottoman Empire. We can do all of that if you'd like. And that there is no occupation and Egypt can also open the door and end all of this 5 minutes from now. And Hamas can release all the hostages in Israel and stuff. We could do all that if you want. But all of that aside, when you see the savage medieval barbarian-like stuff that really is more for Lord of the Rings or for Game of Thrones, and you think, oh, and by the way, Michael, the entire time, they don't scream free Palestine. They scream kill all the Jews, Allahu Akbar, and kill all the Jews. So yes, Chuck Schumer, they'd love to kill you, and Bernie Sanders, they'd love to kill you, and everything else. But when it's so distant, the level of insanity, that people in the West cannot understand it at all. They simply cannot believe that these types of people exist. And they do exist. And Israel, for whatever their flaws may be, they are going to finish the job. And just imagine right now, there are hostages, if they're still alive, that have now been underground for 6 months. People as old as 82, I think, and a baby that likely is not alive, that was, a year or something. But imagine if they get a couple of these people out now after being underground for 6 months and basically surviving on like a quarter of a pita bread, and they look like Holocaust survivors coming out of that. Imagine now a new level of psychological trauma. And that's the good outcome, meaning if they get out, they may all be dead. So there's so many layers here. But for all of these whack jobs that seem to have a problem with Israel defending itself, and only Israel is ever subjected to how to defend themselves and when they're allowed to do things, and they're the only country that would allow one rocket to be shot in, much less thousands of rockets all the time, and all of the stuff they've survived. There's just such a sad miscalculation with so many people, and I think that goes back to old hatreds that, for the most part, goes back to just old ancient hatreds that are very hard to untangle.
Folks, did you know that Fast Growing Trees is the biggest online nursery in the U.S.? They've got more than 10,000 different kinds of plants, over 2 million happy customers in the U.S. They've got everything you possibly want: fruit trees, palm trees, evergreens, houseplants, so much more. Whatever you're interested in, they have it for you. You could find the perfect fit for your climate and space. And Fast Growing Trees makes it easy to order online. They offer free plant consultation forever. And they were very, very smart, because they sent me a little gift certificate and they said, buy whatever you want. And I bought a tree, and it came to my house and I put on my stoop, and it's doing great. So I'm delighted to be able to endorse fastgrowingtrees.com. You don't need to have a yard. You need a lot of space. You grow lemon, avocado, olive, or fig trees inside your house. And the experts at Fast Growing Trees curate thousands of plants so you can find the perfect fit for your climate, location, and needs. This spring, they have the best deals online, up to half off on select plants and other deals. And listeners to the show get an additional 15% off their first purchase. All you got to do is use code WELCOME at checkout. That's an additional 15% off at fastgrowingtrees.com using code WELCOME at checkout. Go to fastgrowingtrees.com, code WELCOME. Offer is valid for limited time. Terms and conditions may apply. You'll be thanking me when you have that green thumb. Let's get back to the show. So I can guess your answer, but I'd love to hear you expound. Were you there when Chuck Schumer had
Yeah.
publicly said that he thinks Netanyahu is a so Chuck Schumer was Senate Majority Leader, very Jew, very Jew, very Brooklyn Jewish, publicly said that Netanyahu is one of the obstacles, if not the biggest obstacle to peace in Israel. Both Netanyahu, of course, did not take kindly to these comments, but his big opponent also, I forgot the guy's name, publicly said this is completely inappropriate for you to be kind of interfering in our elections, which for a long time has been a mantra about foreign interference in American elections and so on and so forth. I'm curious both your thoughts in some specificity, but also in terms of what was the reaction from Israelis.
Yeah, it was really, I was there. That was like day 3 when I was there. I think it actually was the day that I saw that video. And I tweeted out that they should have Chuck Schumer's eyes taped open like Clockwork Orange, make him watch that video where they're talking about kill all the Jews. You are still a Jew at the end of the day, Chuck Schumer. And by the way, when they're done with the Jews, they'll figure out the ways to kill the rest of the other people, let's say the Sunday people. They'll just figure it out,
Well,
right?
no,
So
next would be the moderate Muslims. It wouldn't be the Jews. When I was in Turkey, like that's who they usually, if they don't have Jews to target, they're going to target the Westernized Muslims. Like they
yeah,
go
which
after them all the time.
by the way, they're doing that already.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
They killed many Muslims on October 7th. They took Muslims hostage. They killed people from Thailand who were working on some of these farms. I mean, the point, the savagery is the point. But so yes, look. And first off, what Schumer said was just complete nonsense.
But
In that,
let me interrupt you because something
yeah,
I want people to realize, because until I went to Turkey, to Bodrum, and I saw what it's like there, it was very, very eye-opening for me, just as I'm sure going to Israel was for you. So to people watching this who are, like, kinda confused, ask your friends who are Persian or who are, like, Westernized Muslims, especially from Turkey, ask them what they think about this. You're going to have a very different answer than you're going to hear from a Jewish person who went to an Ivy League, because they know that they're the first. If not us, it's going to be them, and that they're targets all the time. And the anathema is just through the roof towards because Persia used to be so westernized that Andy Warhol was friends with the Shah, and this is like a broader point, which like I think Westerners are just often naive to the nature of evil. They think someone's bad, and I don't know that much about the Shah of Iran, but let's suppose he's bad. So they're always like, "This guy sucks. We got to get rid of him." And they never think it could get worse. They never think the replacement's going to be like. They always think everyone's Hitler. The dial's always at 11, and it's like, guys, if you think Trump is for example, as bad as it can get for a president in terms of authoritarianism, you're completely deranged.
yeah, that's a great. I mean, not to divert too far, but I mean, I've been saying that about Trump for a long time. That these people, you've done this, dial it up to 11, and wait till what comes after Trump.
Yeah.
If you guys put him in jail and everything else, just wait till what will arise. But without getting too far down that road. I'm sorry.
Chuck
What
Schumer.
was
We're
the
talking about Chuck Schumer,
oh,
the
Chuck
boot on the
Schumer,
ground
right?
in
Sorry.
Israel. Yes.
So first off, what he said was an absolute lie, almost at every level that something could be a lie at. So first off, the idea that Netanyahu is the problem with peace or the two-state solution. First off, the Arabs, they were not Palestinians at the time. The Arabs were offered a state in 1937, Peel Commission, 1947, UN partition plan when the British Empire was wrapping up. They were offered a state somewhere in the 60s, some I think between the 67 war and the 73 war, and then the two famous ones, at least in modern times, 2000 and 2008, where they were given basically everything they asked for, including splitting Jerusalem, which would be absolutely insane. And not only did they not just say no, they didn't come back with any counteroffer. Arafat famously said, Mahmoud Abbas. Arafat said no to the first one with Clinton, and then Mahmoud Abbas said no to the second one. And he famously said, "My people will kill me. You want me to take this? They'll kill me." So they've never wanted a state. They want no state of Israel. That's period. So the idea, and think about it, the truth is not only obvious because the international community and Israel has made several offers. If you were being genocided and all of these horrible things were happening to you and anyone offered you virtually anything, you would take it. The Israelis, before the modern state of Israel, they accepted the Peel Commission. They accepted the partition plan. We want much more of this, but we'll take the little bit that you give us and do what we can. So that is one level of the truth. But Schumer also, this idea that you're going to interfere with Democrat allies in their elections is also crazy. As you said, like, I thought we're not nation building anymore. So, like, what right do you have to say that? For Schumer to use his religion as part of this, it's like, dude, that buys you one more day before you get beheaded. You are a knee-buckled, pathetic coward. And by the way, everyone has their own calculations. You know, Michael, in Germany in World War II, there were Jews who ratted out other Jews,
Of
thinking
course, yes.
it would save them. So that's what his calculation is. He knows Ilhan and AOC are coming to behead him. So he thinks if he can throw those Jews 10,000 miles away under the bus, that maybe it'll delay his beheading. So there is no two-state solution. And the other thing, to really directly answer your question, what the feeling was like there, Netanyahu has probably about 70% approval right now because the country is very unified in that they have to win this war. Almost everyone there, except the most hardcore sort of Likudnik person, that's his political party, knows that he has to step aside after, right? This is still on him, the security failure and the intelligence failure and everything else. But they are fully unified as a country in terms of fighting and winning a war. But then when Schumer says that across the world, everybody was supporting him. I did not hear one. I met with, I have friends there that are, more lefty, although there's really no true left in Israel anymore. I think even the most hardcore peace people are like, okay, that's it. But I didn't find anyone. Yes, there are posters all over Tel Aviv that are probably funded by American NGOs that probably have something to do with Barack Obama. But the country is pretty damn unified in, we got to win this war. We got to get our hostages back. And this threat, no more after this. Like, this is going to so alter the reality. And I'll tell you one other really disturbing thing, which is that most people think that the real war hasn't even started yet, because the real war is in the north with Hezbollah, which is running Lebanon. Lebanon is a failed state now run by a terrorist organization, a Shiite terrorist organization run by Iran. And they have about 100,000 much more advanced rockets faced all over Israel. So I bet you don't even know this, and you're well-versed in this stuff. Do you know that right now there's 100,000 Israelis in the north that are displaced, in the north, having nothing to do with Gaza? But that's how severe the rocket threat is there. So in the hotel that I was at in Tel Aviv, it was mostly you look at these people, they look like the most average people. I don't mean that judgmentally.
Yeah.
They're the most average people. They don't have much. And they're living in the Sheraton, basically in Tel Aviv, for months now, because the war in the north is going to be the big one.
So let's break this down, because you said, this war has to be won, like, so on and so forth. You can understand the concern of a lot of people that how many innocent Palestinians are being killed. The death toll is enormous. These are women and children who's, not getting food and so on and so forth. What does winning that war look like? Are you talking about just, killing everyone in Palestine, or are you sending them somewhere else? I mean, this is not the kind of thing where it's like, North Korea, South Korea, we're just going to have this border, because that was the status quo before October 7th. There's this kind of DMZ situation, supposedly. Like, what?
Well, they should expand. My personal position is that you have to expand the DMZ situation. So there was a border between Israel and Gaza, but I went to the border, and we could hear bombs and we could see explosions in the distance. The border was basically a fence with some barbed wire. Meanwhile, you look at the Egypt border, because Egypt has a border with Gaza. They've got 3 layers of massive concrete fences, barbed wire everywhere, armed guards, all sorts of stuff. So first off, I think you expand a demilitarized zone, and literally anyone walks in it, you get shot. It's just how it is. No more of this. I think they are going to do that. So most likely, they're not going to give up their own territory to do that. You're going to pinch off a little bit of Gaza. I think then what you would do, and this is just my opinion, every time a rocket is shot, we're going to take another 50 meters. Every day you shoot a rocket, don't shoot rockets, it's yours. We want nothing to do with you. Enjoy the beach, blah, blah, blah. We'll even help you with the reconstruction, or we won't be impeding the reconstruction, at least. So that will be part of it. But the other part of it, in terms of winning, first off, it could be over right now. Release the hostages and surrender. Have Hamas surrender. Israel wants nothing to do. The other 2 million people that live in Gaza, Israel wants nothing to do with them. There is not one Jew there. There is not one temple there. They still want nothing to do with them. They just would prefer that they not burst into their country and kill them. So I don't know exactly what the reconstruction looks like, but it should be very clear to everyone, even the most Israel-hating person out there, that the Arab world wants nothing to do with these people. They haven't offered to take in any of them. Sinai, which Israel once controlled and gave up to Egypt for peace, for a piece of paper, is 3 times the size as Israel. Almost nobody lives in Sinai. I was in Sinai in 1997. I took a bus ride from Israel all the way through Sinai to it was like a 10-hour bus ride. I can't believe I did it. I would certainly never do it these days, to Cairo. It's pretty much empty. It's pretty much empty, and it's the land of the Bible, Mount Sinai, where Moses, if you're a believer, they believe that Moses got the 10 Commandments there. It's a desert, but you can make it work. Israel made a desert work. They could all go there tomorrow. If anyone honestly believed that Israel was this evil genocidal force bent on killing all the Palestinians, then why wouldn't their Egyptian brothers open up the border? Why wouldn't Saudi Arabia take in 10 people? Why wouldn't the Hashemite king over in Jordan, who actually is an apartheid ruler over his Palestinian population, why wouldn't he take in 10 of them? Well, his father did kill 30,000 of them in one day in 1972, Black September. They want nothing to do with these people. The only reason that they talk about the Palestinians is it's their way of getting the Jews. It is really as simple as that. There isn't much more to it. And I think finally what this thing has done has caused the average Israeli finally to give up the delusions of peace in that sense. There is no 2-state solution. First off, it would be 3 states. You'd have the West Bank and Gaza, and then you'd have to somehow connect them right through the heart of Israel. So you'd have 2 terror states on a state that would basically be 6 miles wide. It's completely insane. From my position, it was always insane. You can never find a tweet of mine calling for a 2-state solution. It was always complete nonsense. And if the Arabs cared about these people, they would be helping them. But they really just want to keep them in perpetual disaster after disaster because it excuses what they can then do to their own people. That really is just the truth.
There'd been a lot of after October 7th, there'd been a lot of talk about, okay, this obviously didn't happen overnight. This was carefully planned. Like, what led up to this? One of the rumors that I'd heard, and I don't remember from whom, and it may have even been from you, I apologize if it was this idea that this wasn't just supposed to be Hamas. It was supposed to be a several-pronged attack, that Hamas from the West Bank, Hezbollah from the north, Hamas from Gaza, Hezbollah from the north, and maybe the West Bank jumping in. So you have Israel having to defend itself on 3 fronts, and that Iran was pissed that basically Hamas jumped the gun, and Iran was going to be firing, missiles to Israel at the same time and wipe Israel off the map in that context. And they got pissed that Hamas blew their load, so to speak. Sorry to use such a horrible metaphor, but that's the first one that came to mind. Why, from your perspective, or from your understanding at least of this issue, Hamas was puffing their chest, being like, "You guys watch out," and Israel was clowning them on Twitter, being like, "Hold me back, bro! Hold me back, bro!" The Hezbollah people are not strawberry shortcake. They have no problem taking lives, including the fellow citizenry. Why do you think they have not moved south?
So there's a lot of talk about this in Israel. And as I said, that was the most shocking, the obvious horror and shock of seeing the evil. That was shocking at like the guttural level. The shock sort of intellectually to me was what's going on in the north and the concern up there. There's several theories about this, and I talked to some people in the military and some people in the know in the media. I mean, basically, the average person in Lebanon, they don't want to be at war with Israel. Beirut used to be a beautiful city before the Islamists destroyed it and the Palestinians basically destroyed it through proxy wars with Israel and everything else. So the average person in Lebanon, when I say that they're a failed state, the government of Lebanon is not running South Lebanon. So you've got a terrorist group that basically just has all of these rockets facing Israel. And the average Lebanese is like, man, if they start that war, if Nasrallah just gives it the go, it's like they're going to have to, Israel can't fight. No country can fight just a 3-pronged war in perpetuity. Life has to go on and everything else. They have a limited amount of weapons and you have a limited amount of mental ability to function as a state.
Sure.
If you're endlessly under war. So Israel would have to bomb the flying fuck out of Lebanon. And so I think what's holding Nasrallah back is he can't beat Israel and then like, what are they going to march into Israel and have Lebanon too? No, it would come at the cost of mutually assured destruction. And a lot of these people are genuinely suicidal, but some of them are political operatives as well. And I think he knows he would be dead and everyone he knows would be dead. And what would be the purpose of all that? So instead, they're just an endless headache. But really think about it. Every day still, they shoot a couple of rockets into Israel. Imagine what we would do if a rocket from Toronto got shot into Detroit. We would bomb Mexico. So if that was one rocket, Israel is the only country that is expected to have rockets hit it from every which direction, somehow have pinpoint precisions not to hurt anybody when they respond. They're also supposed to have their citizens beheaded and murdered and women raped and kidnapped, and also figure out how to feed the very people who are doing all of that, who all support it. Every poll shows that they support it. It's a really crazy thing. And Michael, I think it just has, and until Jews realize this, it just has to do with the Jews. And until Jews realize you just got to do what you got to do, which is survive. And that's really all the Israelis are trying to do. No Israeli, I never heard anyone saying we need American troops or anything. All they want is support, meaning they want some diplomatic support, help us be able to fight this on a diplomatic front, because the world is pretty damn backwards and we don't have oil. So a lot of, Qatar can fund a lot of this insanity, on our college campuses and elsewhere. But all they want is diplomatic support, and they want to make sure they have enough munitions to fight this thing. That's it.
I'm going to have to disagree with it a little bit slightly, because in terms of, I think although the concerns are often overblown for political reasons, there are plenty of literal gangsters making their way through the southern border, and the United States isn't doing anything at all other than welcoming them with open arms. So it's not at all
Oh,
intuitive to me. It's not at all intuitive to me that if we're invaded, we're going to be bombing or shooting anyone, as opposed to giving them cots and some social security card.
you know what? I actually will slightly backtrack my comment, because I was talking about an America that existed for about 250 years, and you're talking about the America that exists right now, where absolutely we are watching an invasion. Actually, one of the most, there were so many sort of horrific or bizarro moments that happened there. But when I was at that kibbutz that I was mentioning, and I could see Gaza about a mile and a half away, and I was literally seeing explosions, and you hear them and everything else, I was watching on Twitter videos of just more and more people pouring through our American borders. I tweeted about it. I said, hey, I'm in Israel right now, seeing the aftermath of what happened at their borders when they allowed people to pour in. Now, it's not exactly the same situation, but America's allowed in about 7 million people in 3 years. We have no idea who these people are. We know lots of them are bringing crime and drugs. There was the guy who was a rapist in Tampa who got arrested, and then ICE released him because they said they didn't have enough beds. But thank God we have Ron DeSantis here, and the guy was arrested about a half hour later. But so yes, I will slightly edit what I'm saying, which is if a rocket shot in from Mexico now, who the hell knows what these people do? Because we have a man with dementia pretending to be president and a bunch of terrorist sympathizers in Congress.
And to be clear, I am, broadly speaking, I would say, pro-immigrant, in the sense that I think immigrants are especially if they're selected for skills and things like that,
Of
tend to be
course, of
net
course.
positive immigrant. But I had Ashley St. Clair on the show several weeks ago, and she, again, it's very important to look past the propaganda and talk to people who were there. And she was at the border, and she goes, these were not moms with their kids who are indigent. She goes, the percent of them who are like 20 to 40-year-old males was through the roof. So I do think I'm broadly speaking humanitarian. If people are fleeing failed states and they just want some food, they don't have to have the right to vote. But if we can take care of them in some capacity, I think it's better than not. But again, that's not who's coming through from her perspective, what she saw with her own eyes. And here's the other thing: and no matter how much of a bleeding heart you are, if you have a lot of young males who have no skills and no capacity to assimilate into a broader culture in terms of getting employment, something like that, it's not going to end well, because young men with testosterone and nothing to do aren't going to start, Habitat for Humanity, putting up churches.
Michael,
Many
it's
of them
basic.
are going to start doing awful things.
It's basic math. If we're to believe that it's about 7 million people, which is more than the population of, I think, 38 states in the last 3 years, let's say 10% of them are a little nefarious. That's
Yeah, right.
That's 700,000 people. Let's say 10% of those 700,000 are pretty nasty. That's 70,000 people. And let's say half of those are like truly evil gang, whatever. Now you got 35,000 people. That's still a lot of people to have running through our country. So I think, and that was one of the sort of my take homes, was like, what have we done to our country? Israel is a very serious country dealing with serious issues in a very serious part of the world, right? we have largely become an unserious country in terms of our political discourse, our cultural discourse, blah, blah. It's like we are so ill prepared for something bad to happen. And it just feels like, doesn't it feel like it could just happen at any moment? I mean, you mentioned 9/11 before.
Yes.
You and I were both in New York City at 9/11. Nobody expected it to happen, and it dysregulated the country for a long time. We ended up launching at least one crazy war because of it, really two. Like what, and now, and we weren't nearly as divided back then, and it wasn't algorithmically fueled and everything else. So now take all of our political division, take one political party that basically their goal is to upend America and tell you that this place was founded in racism and all of those things. Now have some sort of horrific terrorist attack. We won't agree whether it was real or not. Half the country will think the good guys were the ones that were killing the innocents. We have so many things that if we don't start really thinking through quickly, we could be on the other side of this and things could be significantly, significantly worse.
Sometime in the early 80s, REO Speedwagon's airplane made an unannounced, middle-of-the-night landing.
This is my friend Kyle MacLachlan, the star of Twin Peaks. And he's telling me about how he discovered a real-life Twin Peaks in rural North Carolina, not far from where he filmed Blue Velvet.
What was on the plane was copious amounts of drugs coming in from South America. Supposedly, Pablo Escobar went looking for other spots, quiet, out-of-the-way places to bring in his cocaine.
My name is Joshua Davis, and I'm an investigative reporter. Kyle and I talk all the time about the strange things we come across, but nothing was quite as strange as what we found in Varnamtown, North Carolina.
There's crooked cops, brother against brother. Everyone's got a story to tell, but does the truth even exist? Welcome to Varnamtown.
Varnamtown is available wherever you listen to podcasts.
Let's get back to the show. Do you know what I think is a very plausible path forward? And I'm curious if you'll acknowledge this is plausible. Okay, hear me out. I do not think, and I'm confident you'd agree, that Joe Biden is some ideological leftist in the Bernie Sanders AOC mold. He's
no,
go ahead.
I completely agree with that. He's not. The question is he running the operation? But continue.
Right. Yeah. He's this corporate hack. He's been his entire career.
Yeah.
I can very easily see a path forward where if there's a big Republican wave in Congress and he gets reelected, that he does this Clinton-style pivot, because I think that is where his natural inclination is. He's like a blue-collar union guy, and he would actually, without any shame, give in to the Republicans and pivot the Democratic Party back to the center like Clinton did. And I know it's hard to visualize, but if it had been 1994, January 94, and I sat down here and I said to you, Bill Clinton is going to give us a balanced budget, you'd laugh at me in my face, and that's what ended up happening.
This is why I call you the Willy Wonka of politics, Michael, because you come up with these wacky theories that it sort of sounds nuts. I actually do agree with that to an extent, except the one I would say asterisk you have to put to that is that we don't know what's really driving Biden. Correct. And who's really driving Biden. Correct. So I agree with you. The Joe Biden that we knew for 40 years probably could do that because he was a political beast through all of that. The problem is now when Joe Biden gets up there and he says at the end of every speech, oh, if I say more, I'm in trouble, or they don't want me to answer questions. It's like, does that bother anybody? Who is he talking about? Is it Obama? Is it like, so unfortunately, the ideologues that likely are driving him would probably not do that. And because we don't know that, that's why this whole election feels so shitty. It's not just because we're repeating Joe Biden versus Donald Trump. It feels shitty and uninspiring because it's like, wait a minute, nobody really thinks he's the president. And then there's such a circus behind Trump, who I'm obviously going to support. Like, there's not even a question. But like, it's such a bad connection. But can I ask you a question actually on your show?
One more thing before you ask that question, because people have mousetraps in their heads. I'm not saying what the scenario just laid out is certain or even likely. I'm just saying it's conceivable. And I agree with you that the globalist forces and the NGOs are more powerful now than they were in the 90s. So I'm not even saying it's likely. I'm just saying it's conceivable. So everyone calm down. No, go ahead.
No, but that's one of the reasons that out of all of the people that I've met all of these years, and we can talk about the Ben Candace thing and everything else, like you're one of the people that I consistently like just love listening to because you have all of these different thoughts and these competing ideas and kind of crazy things that end up not being so crazy and all the rest of it. But my question for you is this. Here, now look, I got glasses this week. I'm 47 years old, so I'm going to put on my glasses so I seem like a serious newsman when I ask you this question. But I do have a concern that I think maybe you can address as it relates to Israel and all of this, which is that I think most people have seen here. Look, now I've got my glasses on. Look at this.
Serious business.
Do I look smarter?
Yeah.
Except they're not anti-glare glasses because they're real glasses, not fake newsman glasses. So I look like an alien or something. But in any event, my question actually is this, which is, many of us were warning about identity politics. We saw which way the woke was going to go. October 7 blows it up. Lefty Hamas supporters, gays for Palestine. We've seen all of that insanity. Harvard, all of it. I am concerned about what I see brewing on the right now that I think is largely trolls, and it's just kids in their basements screwing around, putting up Hitler memes and whatever. And well, you've already partly answered my question, so I think you know what my question is. So go ahead.
Well, I don't know what your question is, but I don't think it's kids in basements. But go ahead.
Well, no. My question is, so how real is whatever this thing that seems to be bubbling up in the kind of online right that I would say someone like Candace has been playing a little bit of footsie with?
So I wrote a book about this. I was on your show discussing.
I know. That's why I'm asking the question.
I'm not saying for you. So I saw this coming. When did that book?
Yeah.
I don't even remember when the book came out. Like
that one was around 2018, I think. The first.
Dude,
book.
we're so old that can't even narrow it down what year books of mine came out. 2019. That's what I thought. May 2019. Yeah. So I was at Charlottesville. I only learned, by the way, in the last year that when I was there the second day. So when I was going to Charlottesville, I was toying with the idea of speaking at that event, and I was going to go up there and give a talk about my favorite contestants on Drag Race, because I knew that half the audience would think it was absolutely hilarious and he's fucking with us, and the other half would be losing their minds, which is I'm delighted because everyone in the audience is reacting how I'm happy with. And that night before was that Tiki Torch March, and it's on CNN because this was supposed to be some little thing, like 30 people. Like I didn't think it was going to be international news. Are you kidding me? So I go there, and what is not reported, and I was there, was the streets were swarming with Antifa. And they were eyeing everybody. My friend Bob was there with his cowboy hat, and they like knocked the hat off his head, started getting in his face. He wasn't wearing. Bob is not a Nazi, to put it mildly.
Yeah.
And it turned out the house that I was taking sanctuary in, I didn't know this at the time, was the Identity Europa house, which is a white nationalist, white supremacist group. I only found this out in the last year. So it's even funnier to me now that in retrospect, they were sitting there fuming. They were very nice, but the fact that they're harboring a Jew in their own home, it was kind of an interesting situation. This is a concern. I don't think there is an easy answer. There's several scenarios. One of which is this is something that's kind of like has to work its way through and then be resolved. So America's not ever, despite some leftist propaganda, America's never had any kind of strong Nazi history. There's been history of anti-Semitism, certainly the Klan and racism, but not all hate groups are interchangeable, because as I point out in my book, The New Right, there were more white supremacists who fought the Nazis in World War II from America than urban feminists. Those good old boys from the South were not big fans of black people or so on and so forth. And again, this was a different time. This is like 1940. So I think also when you kind of suppress any kind of worldview for a certain mindset, that gives it a sense of validity. Oh, you guys aren't talking about flat Earth because you know that if we have this conversation, there's going to be a lot of questions you can't answer. The other issue is, let's take national divorce. Okay. I'm a big proponent of national divorce. I'm the first one to get the ball started. So the argument is you want national divorce because you're Jewish, so you could split up the country and divide and conquer. But if I'm against national divorce, you're against national divorce because you want Israel to control DC and control America. So if you start, it's like a Jonathan Haidt thing. You start with the conclusion and then you work your way backwards. So it's a very complicated mindset that's hard to break out of. I think the tricky thing, the thing I would look to is I remember in high school, and you remember this even better than I do, being a gay person. Uh, Being gay was such a stigma. I remember when I was in high school, I was arguing with my dad because RuPaul wasn't out. And I'm like, "You don't know this." And my dad's like, "Are you crazy?" I'm like, "You don't know." And now it's Times Square, it's conquer territory. Like there's rainbow flags everywhere. And
Right.
one of the ways this happened is what I call the ambassador program, because it's very, very hard to be totally homophobic if you know one gay person who you like. If
Yeah.
it's like your uncle or your coworker, it's gonna be like, all right, like maybe I don't approve of this, but I don't hate this guy. Like I don't wish harm on him or his family. It's gotten harder in recent times with this libs of TikTok stuff, where I'm sure you're obviously find no relation to some of these people, and you don't know what genderqueer is or things like that. So I think, but the thing is, if you are going to have this whole, and I'm friends with a lot of people in this scene, there is a big divide in this space between the Zionists and the pro Hamas people, because there's a lot of them who are skeptical of people like Chuck Schumer and people like Jon Stewart and people who like run the New York Times. But at the same time, they're like, guys, if you're asking me to choose between Jewish power and Hamas and the Palestinians, you're completely insane. That's not what we're for. So from the outside, it might look like there's a unity. From the inside, it's not the case. You could see it if you know how to read between tea leaves on Twitter and space like this. I was just having this conversation earlier this week, and it's this kind of thing where it's like, if you're not if you're pro-Israel in every way, you're Jewish controlled, right? It's like, well, I was for the truckers in Canada. I'm certainly not union controlled. I'm certainly not
Well,
don't have divided loyalties between the US and Canada. When I'm concerned about Germans being raped en masse or no-go zones in Britain, I am not a fan of Britain. There's nothing to do with Jews in those situations. So I think, but when you start with that as your conclusion, no matter what is said is going to feed into it. And if something doesn't feed into it, data, oh, they're lying or it doesn't count,
right.
you know.
Well, you're making I would say, a pretty deep point about starting with the conclusion, because I think that's what a lot of these people have done, and I think if, to whatever extent we can get them to step away from that for a moment, I think they would actually see that everything is actually the reverse of that. The idea that Israel is somehow liked by the globalist movement. So let's say you're an Alex Jones type and you believe the globalists and the WEF are coming about, and I largely do believe a lot of that stuff. Like, I think they don't like the independent nation state, and I think that COVID was, at some level, a move to really destroy our borders and all of those things. But if you view that, it's like all the globalist organizations hate Israel. The United Nations, in essence, has been a terrorist organization on Israel's borders. We now know that through UNRWA and what they're doing up in Lebanon with Hezbollah. It's supposed to be guarded by the UN, Resolution 1701. So the globalists largely hate the Jews because Jews are going to be a little bit of a pain in the ass because they don't shut up when it comes to their globalist plans.
I'll defend the Jew haters here. But then what they'll point to correctly is George Soros and the guy who's number 2 at the WEF, who's Israeli. And these people, in my opinion, are completely evil human beings who are nefarious. Hold on. And then when you criticize George Soros, as I've done, you get accused of being an anti-Semite, which is the idea that any billionaire who is involved in politics financially is beyond criticism
Right.
for any reason is completely psychotic. No leftist would say this in any other context. And I got accused of being a Holocaust denier because I didn't think like it's appropriate to refer to George Soros as a Holocaust survivor or victim, whatever it was, in the same way as like he's like another Anne Frank who obviously wasn't a survivor. This was someone.
Oh, I actually remember. I remember that. Well, look, George Soros is evil. I judge him as the individual that he is, and I judge him by his actions. And by the way, he's wildly anti-Israel. He funds the NGOs that are trying to take out Israel. So yeah, I think in essence what you're saying is Jews succeed. So if you're a capitalist, you can find socialist Jews that you hate because Jews succeed. And if you're a socialist, you can find capitalist Jews that you hate because Jews succeed. But I guess it's better to succeed than be dead.
Well, there's also the argument that these Jews are succeeding at the expense of everybody else. And that's kind of like non-falsifiable. It's like, I'm not sure.
Well, right. It's a crazy premise. I mean, it's just an absolute crazy premise.
I don't think it's crazy, but it's just, I think it's something that is internally coherent, but hard to disprove. Like, how
Fair.
are you going to run this experiment to the alternative? There's no parallel universe.
Right,
You know what I mean?
right.
Like that's the kind of scenario. I'm curious to hear your
Well,
thoughts.
I would just say one other thing with that, which is
Sure.
that, but nobody seems to accuse Asian people of that, or American Indians who, not Native Americans, Indian people from India who come to America who exceed at crazy rates, or people from Senegal who exceed at crazy rates despite their
Nigeria,
skin color
Igbo.
often,
But
et
actually,
cetera, et cetera.
it's actually kind of funny because Jared Taylor, who runs American Renaissance, who I think was the first person kicked off YouTube, I interviewed him for my book, The New Right, at his home, and he was raised in Japan. He's got this very weird specific accent, and I said, Jared, and he's a white nationalist,
Yeah.
very white, and very erudite. So it's kind of disarming when you hear someone talk in such refined ways. So as house, I go, Jared, all these things that are being attacked, the Jews are being attacked for. These are arguments that you hear for decades from certain like groups in African American culture. Like Public Enemy has an album called "It Takes a Nation of Millions to Hold Us Back." That we're underachieving because there's a conspiracy to hold us down. But for them, we'd be wealthy and successful. And Jared goes, "I've been making that same argument for decades." So it's the thing is when you have and if you think you deserve to be at place X and you're actually at place Y, it's someone's fault.
Yeah.
Right. This is just universal. And if it's that someone who has been that convenient someone for a long time, and well, I'm not allowed to talk about them, therefore it must really be true, or else they let me talk about it. You can understand how it gets to kind of that point and psychology. Let me ask you a
Yeah,
little bit
and I
more
would
about
say
your.
largely that's unfortunately where Candace has sort of drifted, and hopefully it doesn't go too far down that
Did you say
road.
drifted or grifted? Before before it took me until I got on the plane out, before I was crying when I left North Korea. Like I held it together the whole time. Were you in tears at any point during your trip?
No, because it was such a juxtaposition of the horrors that we described, and then being out and about in Tel Aviv, where the life is just endless. The beautiful people on the beach to the incredible restaurants, and the thing about Israeli society is because it's a people that have come from so many parts of the world, much like America. Their food is exquisite, their music is great, the culture is great. So I never even had a chance, maybe, and I'm not actually the most, I toured with Jordan, and Jordan would cry a lot at different little things, and it was, I think only once did I get like a half a tear out. So it's not really my style. I will tell you this, and my two guys are in the studio right now, Connor and Phoenix are with me. I mean, the day of the video, like I was not right for the rest of the day.
Sure.
But then there was just so much happening that you just move on, and that's largely what they have to do.
Folks, head over to malice.locals.com where Dave will be taking questions from supporters. Dave, we're running out of time. What
Yeah.
has been your favorite part of this interview?
You always do this to me, and I know it's your thing. You're good at what you do, Malice. But you're a sane human being. You're like completely insane, and also you're insane, and that's what's great about it, right? Like that really is the truth. And when you and I, whenever we go out to dinner or we break bread, I wish you drank. You don't drink, but you're normal and sane. And I know that if it came down 3 weeks from now and we had a horrific political disagreement about something, I know that it would not affect our friendship and it would not go sideways, which is why the way I ended my show today when I was talking about the Ben Candace thing, it's like, man, I think largely, unless I am completely misjudging Candace here, that they do want to live in the same country and that they do love America and all these things. And they agree on probably 90% of the specific issues. And now this 10%, unfortunately, is becoming bigger and bigger. But it's like, there are so many huge freaking problems on the horizon. And we better figure out some of this stuff. And I just know that you and I, whether those things ever got between us, it wouldn't get between us. And that is the corny truth, Michael Malice.
You are welcome.